about the film. Chaz, you want to join us? Okay.
Sorry, I didn't know he was going to do that. I gave him a microphone.
Need one more chair and one more mic.
One more chair. Kelly.
To come back, because she has to get a thumb. Again, Renee Baker and the Chicago Modern Orchestra Project. Thank you. Can we go here? We have a tradition at Ebertfest. We give a golden thumb, a casting of my husband's thumb, to say thank you for coming and thank you. He's giving you a thumbs up.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
And we're going to let you catch your breath a little bit, have a seat, and we're going to bring Leonard Malton out, and we will. And are you going to be comfortable there during the Q&A?
Stay right there.
Okay, all right.
We're all on the same bus.
First of all, I have to tell you, that was spectacular. Spectacular. We have been having silent movies. Oh, thank you. We have been having silent movies at Ebertfest for 18, I think either maybe 17 years. And that is, I've never seen anything like this. This is really, I'm serious. The other thing is, I think this movie was as sophisticated as any other silent movie we've had here.
Yes.
And yes, it was, you know, more. We had another one the other day, and The Inhuman Woman, and it goes head to head with any other silent movie we've ever shown. So
I was impressed too.
Oh, were you? Oh,
Yes,
I
I
love
was
that.
impressed too. First off, I think it may be obvious, but it has to be said. The musicians and the conductor who play for silent films are playing non-stop from beginning to end of the movie.
Yeah.
And so it's quite a workout. You know, when you have a concerto, there are breaks.
Not
Even
long.
symphonies have movements,
I know.
and sometimes there's at least a breath.
Oh, they get a breath.
Oh, and one thing that I forgot to tell you is I told some of you in line this morning, when we invited the orchestra to come, we asked how many pieces were there. There are 13. This is an orchestra pit built for 10. And so,
How many we have down there? I think we have 6. We have 16.
oh,
We use every inch.
oh wow. So, tell us about your process of starting the Chicago Modern Orchestra and
Okay.
then
Yeah.
going on to Body and Soul.
A lot of these people I met for almost 26 years. I was the principal violist of the Chicago Sinfonietta. And a lot of these people were colleagues of mine in the orchestra. We only played classical music. We turned our noses up at everything else. And before starting this, I really felt, don't throw anything. I thought anybody that played jazz just can't play classical music. And I was stupid enough to say that out loud many times. So one of the things that I wanted to do was to form an ensemble. This orchestra is generally 40 or so. The last time that we did this film, it was with a group of 30. And the theater also said vehemently, "You will not fit. You will not fit, you will not fit." And I said, "We will make it fit. If I got to put them in the wings, everybody is playing." So we brought this smaller group. But what we've developed is I wanted to overcome the fear of playing non-traditional genres and non-traditional scores. So generally within classical settings, you don't approach that because, you know, we're like little trained monkeys. You go on stage, you don't interpret, you don't emote, you just play what's on the page. So the conductor is the person that gets to emote. When we started this process, I'll be honest, I kind of started this group because I was a composer and did not want to wait until I was dead to have my stuff played. I did. And I know it was kind of freaky because people said, "Oh, the economy. You're starting a what? You're starting an orchestra." I said, yeah. Well, can't you do a trio or a quartet? Well, no, because I heard other things. That was my orientation. So I started CMOP. And that went hand in hand with my writing. The whole film thing started, I never thought I was going toward film. I love it. But I actually had a mentor, the producer of the film, Body and Soul. We actually have a DVD that's released with another score on it, and he said, "I get you. I don't know what it is about your music, but I get you. Let's do some projects." So I said, "You know what? I'm not interested. You do the movie part, I do the music. Don't ask me anything. Don't tell me to change anything. Don't give me any advice. I'm just going to give you the music, and you put it on the movie." And he did. And so we're working on other projects. We're getting ready to go into our 4th movie now. And I'm a particular fan of Oscar Micheaux, but I also just finished A Page of Madness, which is a Japanese 1915 kind of horror flick about what it's like to be inside an insane asylum. And then we have the Golem. We're releasing the Golem April 24th. I know it's hackneyed, but ours isn't. I wanted to do something special with it. And then after that, we're going on to Symbol of the Unconquered, which is pretty ugly. It's ugly. You know, it's got a lot about the Ku Klux Klan in it. And we're going to release it in November, right about election time.
Is that a D.W. Griffith or who is?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, the Symbol of the Unconquered is Micheaux. It was his answer.
His answer to
Birth of a Nation. So I like the creepy stuff, and because I like art film and the avant-garde nature of it, I'm good with this kind of film. I'm not interested in the Hollywood blockbusters because I can score those in a day. Sorry. Oops. But this takes a lot of work and a lot of thought. And the thing I will say about the score and the way that I match the music to the movie is I see the music as a dialogue. Since there is no dialogue, I don't have to play underneath the voices. I can match what's going on. So I can match the eyes batting, and I can match the, I can match all those movements. And if a broom falls, I don't have to go, pat, when the broom falls. You know the broom fell. I didn't need to match it emotionally. So I could keep the music and the mood of the scene going without leading you emotionally. It's a good enough film that you don't need me to lead you. You just need me to help entertain you while you stay in the seat and watch it. So.
The term for what I just referred to as not doing, like hitting the broom on the floor, is called Mickey Mousing in film scoring. It's because that's how they scored the early sound cartoons. everything was illustrated musically. But you're right, you don't have to at all.
Right, yeah, yeah. And one scene that I think you'll really appreciate, when we were working on the film and the church scene, the one before they beat him up, the producer said, oh, well, you know what we need? We need something like holy, holy, holy. You know, it's a black church now, my producer, Italian. I mean, we're like hand in glove, though, no kidding. But he said, well, holy, holy, holy. I said, are you kidding me? I said, we're not going to honor this mess with a real gospel tune. He's a con man. He's a con man. You can see he's tapping the Bible. He's walking around. He's puffed up. The women are handing him money, in the hand. I'm going to put gospel under that. I said, no, we're going to put a little scat. We'll put a little jazz. We're going to put a little saxophone. That's what we're going to do, because that fit with his character. So we weren't talking about that scene. We're talking about him in that character. Now, what was really difficult was to go back and forth between Sylvester and the preacher, because it took me, I won't tell you how many watchings, when he said, well, Renee, we have to change the music. I said, why? It's still Paul Robeson. He said, but it's two different characters. He said, look at the suits.
And their expressions. I loved the way that Paul Robeson came on stage and created a totally different character with
Yes.
just a little bit of a change in the expression on
He's
his
so
face.
good
I
looking.
love that.
Oh.
Yes.
God, he's so good looking.
He's an Adonis. He really is.
Oh, my. He didn't have to sing for me.
And not only that he's handsome, but he has such presence, such incredible presence.
Yeah. For a first role. This was his first movie role. And
Sometimes people think of silent film acting as exaggerated and broad. And you saw some of that here.
there was, yeah.
The mother, the woman who played the mother,
Yes.
is
She's over the top.
Is a little over the
A lot
top.
of this.
But
But-
in just
but-
about every silent movie I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Oh, that.
But then you have Robeson, who never overacts in this film. I mean,
No.
maybe
No.
maybe there's a little bit of heightened drama there, but he conveys so much with so little.
Yeah, yeah.
He gets every idea across, in a way that still plays,
Yes.
that still conveys to us
Yeah,
the meaning of the character.
I remember being a young girl and the first time seeing Paul Robeson and thinking, I can't remember what I saw him in, or I remember the voice, first of all, falling in love with his voice and his mannerism and his presence. And something in this movie, the scene where he bends down goes to his knee to ask the mother's forgiveness, was like a foreshadowing of some of the acting and things that he did later. It brought back, it just immediately, what great presence he had on the screen.
Yeah. I was amazed at how, the handsome never goes away. But when he's the minister, that menacing look, and then when he becomes Sylvester, he's kind of demure and, and really, really in touch with the mom and wants her to feel that her daughter's going to be safe with him. One other funny thing about this movie, the first time we showed this movie, everybody in the audience said, we thought you said this was a race film. We thought you said this was a film with black people. Well, the mom wasn't black. I said, yeah, it's called makeup. Because remember, when you're looking at black and white film, you don't have the level of contrast that we have now, because film is so advanced. So if you don't exaggerate the makeup, then the hues of the skin just kind of all melts in. So you don't really get any, you don't get good and bad characters. This is how we are as people. We need to see dark, we need to see light, we need to see all these things. And so everybody in that cast is a person of color with sometimes very terrible makeup jobs. and running mascara but you got the point, you know. And so that's why I said when I'm putting music to it, I don't have to play sad music for you to know she just got beat. I didn't have to really go sad for you to understand what happened when they ended up in their cabin. Okay, so that's just how I look at music and silent film. Now, granted, if I'm watching Star Wars, I want to see something else. I just paid you $10, and I want to be moved, you know. But with the silent films, I think this is the way to bring them forward, is to marry them to current genres, and I think it's entertaining.
You know what? One thing, mentioning race, my daughter and granddaughter were back there watching it, and they had to leave to get to the airport. And I went out to bid them farewell, and my daughter said, "Mom, I don't understand something about that. Why was the mother white?" And I said, "She wasn't white." I said, "And did you notice yellow Curly was also black?"
Curly Hines.
Curly Hines. And I said, you know, exactly, especially back and during that time, a lot of the actors, especially the women, they would have very fair-skinned actors. They did, you know, and people have heard about like the paper bag test, where you had to put a paper bag next to someone's skin tone to see if they were lighter than a paper bag. Then they could
That was
join.
acceptable.
For, you know,
Yeah.
within the black community,
Right.
it was acceptable back then. Then you could join fraternities and sororities, and you got the scholarships. You got to work in the big house rather than the, you know, picking cotton in the field. All of this stuff. There was so much really, really negative racial things amongst us. And so I had to tell her that was everybody in that movie was black or a person of color. The person who was selling the chicken in Atlanta was meant to be someone from the island, I assume, so.
And Michaud dealt with that in many of his films. And it got a little easier, well, not easier, but they developed a new film stock in the late 1920s, so that by the time he was making his talkie films in the 30s, the film was more sensitive. And it could show a greater range of hues. And Michaud was not above the custom of the time of sometimes casting light-skinned people as the heroic characters and dark-skinned as the villains. And yet here, Paul Robeson, who is both villain and hero, is of course very dark-skinned. So that goes against that too. So there are no rules here. He was making up his own rules.
Right. Well, one of the things that I discovered in trying to figure out which version of this film to do, the original version, as I understand it, so if there are any Michaud experts out there, tell me if I'm off base. The original film was 9 reels. And so this is 5. The hour and 26-minute version. But every time it went to, is it called a censor board, or just the board that you have to go to get past to get your approval to show it, it just got chopped and chopped and chopped and chopped. If you notice, when we got toward the end of the film, for the first time, you saw a card that said Part 8. Who knows what else was chopped up? But when I tried to dig in to find out why it was so chopped up, which is why I had a problem following the storyline, is that there was a vehement problem in the church about Robeson's character and about the negative imagery. So, and when I showed this clip for the very first time to some friends in Vermont, a woman said to me, she said, "I really don't like that church film, that church scene." And I said, what don't you like about it? And she said, "Well, you know, that's just not what I expect. I expect it to be reverent and quiet." And I said, "Did you see all those people jumping up and down?" I said, "You must be Lutheran." because that was the last thing I was thinking about. That woman pushing her husband, trying to keep him awake, and people jumping up and down. And I would no more score that calmly than Fly to the Moon. I mean, I wanted to capture the fervor, the excitement. The church is like the club to a lot of people. I mean, this is where you go, you know, on the weekends. This is where you see your friends. This is where you socialize. So I honored that.
And I do want to say that the dialect that they had, everyone did not speak the same. They changed it from person to person to show you that there was a difference.
It was generational.
Even the educational level or generations are, and I have to admit, at one time, because I was very involved in the civil rights movement, at one time, I would have had objection to showing this. I would have said, there are already enough negative images, let's not do this. Now I embrace it. It's part of our history, it's part of the culture, it's part of film history of what Oscar Micheaux did. I have a cousin who's a scientist, he's a retired scientist, and he just published a book called Climbing the Colored Side, superstitions on on his path of becoming a scientist. He grew up in Georgia, and I think he was born sometime in the 1940s, and so he wrote the 1940s, 1950s, and I remember going down to visit them in like 1958 on their farm. They lived on this big farm, and I do remember that there were some things that my cousin said that I didn't understand. When they were hungry, they would ask me, "Do you want some tea?" And I said, "What?" And it was, "Do you want something to eat?" And so his book is written in the dialect that was actually used. So it's not as if this was just putting, being condescending or putting something down. It's part of a cultural thing, and I get that now, and I embrace it. So thank you. I mean, I think it's just beautiful.
I think it's so significant, though, that the mother speaks in the dialect and the
Yes,
daughter
as well.
does not.
Yes.
The mother is obviously uneducated or not well educated.
Right.
And she may be the daughter of a slave, quite likely at this time, 1925, and and most likely from the South. And so that's reflective of her upbringing and her background. But the daughter, who is younger and more of the modern world, we don't know her education, but she obviously speaks in a different form of English. And I thought that was particularly interesting, the mother-daughter difference.
I want to ask about some of the people down here. How did you choose who would present what? And when you did the composition, do you compose with certain people in mind for playing, or how does that work?
Many of these people are people I've worked with for 20, 25, almost 30 years in orchestras. And so the whole idea of, in order to do this, and to do a lot of the stuff that I do, you have to be able to read, so you have to be classically trained, but you also have to have an off switch, so that when I throw the non-traditional stuff at you, you don't look at me like this is impossible to do, because they see it, they hear it. And one of the first things that we did when we started working, and I explained to many of them, that we were going to be making this non-traditional venture into this crazy music. I'm also a member of the AACM, if you have any idea what that is. It is a wonderful collective of musicians, started in 1965. Correct me when I overstep, Taladin. The Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians, started in 1965 by many venerable musicians, Muhal Richard Abrams, and I'm lucky enough to be a member. So under the umbrella of the AACM, I said, okay, I can write all the crazy music I want now, because that's what people expect from them. But when I engaged these people, I said, nobody go and buy a jazz book, because that's the first thing everybody did. They said, oh, let me go get some workbooks. I said, the first person that shows up with a Jamie Ebersol riff book, you're out. Because I didn't want to hear riffs. I wanted each musician to develop his or her own creative voice. And if I don't like it, I just say I don't like it, and so you do something else. And you do that until you learn my sensibilities. And so it worked. And I know it's very frightening for many of them, because some of them say, I still have that book I went and bought. When you asked me to come, I said, don't open it. Don't open it, because I don't want to hear any riffs. We had a very wonderful young man who played with us, who constantly regurgitated Herb Alpert. He's no longer with us. This is about developing authenticity. This is about expanding beyond the classical training that we all got, you know, when we were in school. Those of us that were lucky enough to get classical collegial educations. And so then, you know, I just met people as I went along. There has to be some sort of synchronicity, because I can't work with everybody. Sorry. But I'm authentic about the journey of these movies. And I've listened to other people who've done silent film. And many of them, honestly, I don't think they even look at the movie. I think they just sit, play a whole bunch of crazy stuff, and then say, I did a score. Well, that's not how I work. So I have to see the movie, because every time we do it, even though we're using some common modules, we're reinventing the sensibilities of the movie. Now, if you want to hear the same thing over and over again, go to my website and buy the DVD. And you can hear that score over and over and over again. But I love the fact that this is a new creation every time. There are some similarities because it's the same people. You know, I keep the same musicians. Because it's hard to train, it's hard to find good help. You know.
Tell me how, you know, when you decided this is what you wanted to do, you wanted to start this orchestra, and it was a risky venture at the time you did it, how much opportunity do you get to play and to travel and to do gigs?
A ton, because I make them. Just like I said, when the whole idea of starting the orchestra was just narcissistic. It was, I am not going to die with my stuff in a box. And I mean, and literally I have thousands in boxes and suitcases. And I said, you know what, this stuff is going to get played. So this idea of standing around and begging your friends to play your stuff and begging people, no, I said, you invest. You put your skin in the game. I said, I want professional musicians. That means they got to be paid. I want people who will do due diligence. Now, a couple of times people said, oh, we really don't like this music. Okay, well, maybe you need to be somewhere else, because this is my journey, and I'd love you to go on it with me, but you're going to go on it my way. And so these people here bring absolute character, integrity, professionalism, technique to everything that they do with me. Now, when they leave, sometimes they're like, oh, God, she was a bear. Did you see that look she gave? My vibes player told a new person a couple of weeks ago, he said, can you catch daggers? Sorry.
And you know, and actually, I want to thank you, because I understood that you were playing at Pritzker Pavilion last night, late into the night, and that you had to get up very early this morning in order to come here to Champaign. So thank you for coming.
One more note about the movie.
Okay, this is about the movie as well, but I have to just ask this, and then I'm going to give it you as many chances as you want, Leonard, for your questions. I want to know who did that. Oh, the singing during the charts of the mother. That was so beautiful.
Okay.
Who was doing that?
I think I kind of overlapped two voices. So we have Joseph Henry. Stand up, Joseph. And his partner in crime, Salik Ziad. And, I got to tell you a story, Joseph, just a few seconds. I met Joseph. I was sitting in a coffee shop, and I'm sitting all the way back by the bathrooms because people always come by and go, "What are you doing? What are you writing?" And I'm like, "Just leave me alone." I leave home to do it so that no one asks me. And he was walking by me in the coffee shop, humming this Carmen McRae thing. Now, I'm sitting back by the men's bathroom. So he's going, I'm like, wait, who are you? He told me at the time he worked for ADT. I said, singing like that? I said, look, I have a rehearsal at my house. Next week, on Tuesday, I want you there. I didn't even know him. But I heard a voice that just said, oh my, what? ADT. And he's been, and he's studying nursing now, but he's with us, and his voice is just a voice of angels. So I take him where I find him, you know?
Those voices just knocked me out. They're beautiful.
Oh, God.
Congratulations to both of you. And thank you both. Going back to what you said about censorship before, it's kind of a minor miracle that the film survives at all. And that it survives in such beautiful condition. But if that end card seemed abrupt when it came along, and it does, it's probably because there was something else there. Yes. And what happened it wasn't just in the silent days, it continued through the 50s even, and there's a new book about this too. But every major city and many states had their own individual censorship boards. Chicago being one of the main ones in the Midwest, but not the only one. And so they would make demands of each film that was going to play in the city. So the Chicago version of the film might have been considerably different from the Atlanta version of the film, or the Denver version of the film, or the San Francisco version of the film. And we don't know which version this is that survives, and what little pieces or larger pieces may have existed at one time. And you know, we continue to find, the archivists of the world continue to unearth things. And you know, we can all hope that someday maybe some other pieces will emerge, and we'll get an even longer, fuller version of this film.
I have a longer version.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm. But I decided to not look at it because the ending is different. I had to rewrite the end of this when we did the DVD because I didn't understand it was a dream. We got all the way to the end and I thought, what? So what I wrote won't work. So I just decided I have a version that's an hour and 49 minutes. So it's 20 or so additional minutes, 22, 23 more minutes, and I just can't watch it unless I'm going to go ahead and score it. But for right now, I'm going to live with this one.
And then the other reason that there are varying running times on silent films is because there's no consistent belief of what speed the silent film should be shown at. And this ignites debates among film scholars around the globe, truly. Is it 16 frames per second, 18 frames per second, 22 frames per second? And a lot of films went out with instructions to the projectionist exactly what speed should be used. But we don't have access always to that information. So that's how, I mean, you can go right now online and look up any famous silent film.
Yes.
Buster Keaton's The General, Charlie Chaplin's The Gold Rush, any Griffith film, and find multiple versions of the same film with different running times. And that's one reason why. It's not that they're different, it's that they're shown at a different speed. And it's very subtle. The differences are very subtle, but it does make a difference.
We'd like to open our question and answer session to the audience. Are there microphones out in the audience? And they'll let us know when they have.
Question down here up front to your left. Normally, I sit up in the balcony, but for this, I came down for the front row.
Can you
And
put it closer to us?
what I wanted to do was put hot dogs on a stick and hold them up in front of the orchestra and just let them cook. This was marvelous. And I really enjoyed watching you conduct. It was a thrill.
Did you hear what he said?
Yes, he was indicating that the orchestra was giving off sufficient heat to have cooked hot dogs, or perhaps
you.
marshmallows, I might say, had he had a stick and the proper food.
Well, it's hot in that pit, believe me. But it's a joy to do. Is there another question?
Question?
Here in center.
Center?
Hi. So first, I love the score. When it first started, I was a little bit nervous just because there were two characters played by one person, and I'm used to scores where there's a theme for each person. And this really drove it forward. And I guess what I really loved about your score in particular is that it kind of kept the character of Isabel from turning into that damsel in distress. Like, she's an extremely strong character, so is her
Yes.
mother. And this kind of gets to my question. I guess you were mentioning that there's a black cinema circuit and then there's the white cinema circuit. This film seemed to touch on a lot of topics like abuse, exploitation, and corruption that everyone now says if this film does it right is very strong and brave. Did that happen in the white cinema circuit? And were there too many other films that did actually go as far as this one back then? And when did it change? Thanks.
Well, I guess the simple answer is yes. Yeah, I mean, the mainstream films for white audiences were subject to the exact same, well, I don't know if it was the exact same, but they were subject to the same, in fact, I don't know if they treated the race films differently or how much they bothered with the race films in all cities. There may have been a north-south divide as far as that goes. But mainstream studio films were given intense scrutiny and cut in many different ways. And they were far from immune. And the church had a very loud voice in all of that, nationwide. And which was one of Hollywood's continuing battles over when Hollywood sort of was feeling its oats and would get a little too racy in some of the subject matter. There was a backlash to that. So that went on for years and years and years.
I did get an invitation about a month ago to include my scored Body and Soul in a conference of films that talked about negative depictions of African Americans in film. And when they contacted me, I'm sure they expected me to go, oh yeah, Hercules, yeah, oh yeah. I said, absolutely not. And they said, well, why? I said, because this is what was. These are not negative connotations. This is Michaud's vision of what was happening in 1925 America. So no, I'm not going to add this film because in the same series was King Kong. Well, okay, well, we got that. We understand what King Kong is about. We understand when you have a Tarzan movie with a whole lot of people of color running around in the woods. We got that, okay? What is negative inside Body and Soul? It's a natural depiction of a scene, whether it's rhetorical or whatever. But we all know shyster ministers. We've all heard of Reverend Ike. We've all heard of Joel Osteen. No, oops, no, I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding. I'm sorry. That was a joke. Oops, don't clap. No, no, I love Joel Osteen. No, but I mean, so what I'm saying is we're not looking at a scenario that could not happen, right? We hear all the time about people who have million and billion dollar jets and whatever, and their congregations are broke or poor. So he merely depicted something, something real.
Thank you. I know you came just for this today. I talked to her, and she really, really wanted to see you. She probably has to get back, but thank you so much.
Did you have a question? Okay, she's gone.
She was looking like she was just saying thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Are there more questions?
There's a question from the balcony in the center.
There.
Hello. I was just wondering, besides, if you thought that Michaud was trying to make some kind of statement about certain institutions and the corruption that might be within them, and also looking at this film, what do you think in terms of gender issues going on in the film? If there's anything that he was saying about the power relationships between men and women at this time, or was it just a form of a narrative playing out?
You want my answer? Okay. One thing I don't do is I don't think too hard sometimes about the issues, because everything can be turned into a political, socio-economic, man, woman, LGBT. It could become a million other things. It was a good film. I wanted to score it. Whatever he was saying about men and women relationships, it was clear in the movie. I rarely turn these projects into political things, because for me, it robs me of the creativity. And it's not that I want to be a dummy and not think about it, but I just want to do the art. Now, once I'm done and I've scored, we can chat about it. But I think in the case of race films, you couldn't go anywhere else to see any other films. It was illegal. I mean, you couldn't, segregation was in place. So he cranked out a lot of films, and a lot of them are lost. So I think, it was kind of like, okay, who's like Haydn and the Esterházys. Haydn was the house musician, and he was hired to write a cantata or whatever every Sunday for their church services. So I think that Michaud was just very, very talented. And I'm not sure that everything had huge agendas. They don't have it for me. I just wanted to score what I thought was a really, really great film.
I'm sure that the subject matter, though, was something that resonated very much, because the church was very much a central institution in the black community.
Right.
And there were good preachers and bad preachers. There were some who were very moral and upright and wanted to help people. And then there were ones who came in, and they used to call them jackleg preachers.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they would come into town and prey on the women, who were probably the biggest church-going population, as well as the innocent, influence the innocent young men in the church. So I think that the subject matter itself was probably just right for topicality at that time.
Down center.
Hi, I wanted to say, usually I did not enjoy silent films, but you made this one very, very enjoyable. What is it that made you pick this particular film and all of the films that you choose to score?
Oh, yeah. Actually, the producer who approached me, he just said, I got a project for you. And actually, I had been asked to do Body and Soul a couple of years before by a local film producer in Chicago, Floyd Webb. And he didn't move fast enough, so I parked it. And then when this other producer asked me, I called him and I said, well, somebody else wants me to do the flick, so I'm going to go ahead. If you want to do something else with me, that's fine. But what I found is with all my friends that are film composers, they take way longer than I do.
How long does it take you to? score
Ooh,
something
I'd have
like
to
this?
kill you if I told you my secret. No, 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 no. No, no, I'm good. It depends on if I've got inspiration. And inspiration to me is get to work. If you get to work, whatever you need will find you. If you're sitting around waiting for the muse, that generally doesn't happen to me. I'm very, very fast. I write in ink because I think my first thought is pretty much what I want. If I go back and start messing with it, then I'm probably thinking about what someone like him might like, or what a critic or something might like. And I just hope that they like what I do. So I just try to stay authentic. And I'm pretty fast. I mean, the thing is, you also have to think on your feet. Because sometimes when things don't work, you gotta. If something's not working, or somebody doesn't come in when I point to them, I'm looking.
I'm sure that didn't happen with anyone here today.
Oh, I'm sure some of you saw me over here look like I had epilepsy, trying to get people in. It's just the way it is. But you have to think on your feet. You have to know the film. You have to know what's coming. No guesswork. No guesswork. And you also, this is just my practice, I don't let them see the film. Because you get 15...
Wait a minute, what did you say?
They don't see the film.
They don't see the film before?
Ever, unless they bought the DVD.
What?
No, no, they can see it,
So-
but they never see it during a performance, ever.
Ah, they're just looking, they're watching you.
Yeah.
Well, partly because she's scoring the whole of the film
Yes,
and not doing that Mickey Mousing,
right.
where you have to have a specific cue for a title card.
Well,
or a
and the
specific
thing
cue
is-
when a guy comes in the doorway.
When I'm here, there's only one opinion that is going to bring this to life, and that's mine. I mean, because I have a whole vision of where I want the modules of music to go, where I want certain sentiments and sounds and things, where I need to bring it down, where I need to bring it up. If you put 15 people watching a film, what's going to happen is they're all going to miss entrances because they're all going to be watching the film. It happens over and over and over again. Even when I say don't watch the film, they still find a way to watch the film. Like Phyllis sitting at the edge of the, and she said, not me. But I think it's just one of these kind of things where if you've watched the film enough times, you have a vision about where it wants to go. The modules are crafted so that they give the audience something to land on. It's a pretty crafty thing.
Oh, which brings up the other thing that when Leonard was saying how when you do something like this, how continuous it is. How do you compose so that certain instruments get a little bit of a break and you go to someone else, or how does that work? What kind of time period?
Sometimes I'm not very good at it because sometimes I'll bring somebody in on something and then I forget that they're playing and I move on to somebody else and they're dying. I mean, they keep going. And then I say, well, you know what? If after 7 minutes you're turning blue and you're not smart enough to get out, okay, well, that's kind of on you. But
You're kind of a taskmaster, aren't you?
But for the most part, they just get me. They just understand. They understand me, and they understand it is never personal. So when I throw that pencil or throw that thing, it ain't personal. It's always about the music and the score. Always, always, always. So however tense it gets down there, and it gets tense. You just get back on the bus, eat donuts, coffee, and you're friends again.
Do we have any more questions?
We've got one here to the right.
Okay.
I love the score, and it reminded me of free jazz. So was there any improvising going on?
Yeah, there was some. There's some, but it doesn't happen, it never happens unless I point to it. So there's no free-for-all going on down there. It might sound like that, but it is definitely controlled. Because you hear it stop and start, and then you hear different things, come in. But, it's controlled chaos. Trust me. I think you guys would say that. Oh, yeah. Because sometimes they get mad. Oh, she brought me in. She only let me have a solo for 30 seconds. And I was all geared up to, well, that's not where the film was going. And, that is one of the tenets of the AACM, just being able to be a good improviser. But there's nothing better than a group of people that can read and improvise. And they also do, if you're familiar with the term graphic scores and things like that, I've developed a language called CCL, which is basically a gestural conducting language, where I can make it sound like it's all written. But that's one of the beauty of some of the work that I do, and that was actually what my doctorate was in, non-traditional conducting languages. So,
Which brings me to another point. How many other African American women composers, conductors of orchestras do you know?
they do this?
Yes.
How many of y'all know?
So we were very fortunate to have them today.
Thank you, sir.
Was there one more question? I see you standing.
I've
No,
got-
you're just standing. Okay.
I've got one here.
Where?
To your right, toward the back.
Oh, okay. Oh, Dr. Eric Pearson.
Thank you for the work. You mentioned other films that you're going to be doing. Is the goal to sort of put together a collection? And the other thing is do you have a historian that sort of digs through and makes sure that you've got the best version of the film that you can find? Because sometimes, you think you have it, and then, 2 weeks later, something shows up, from Indiana someplace, which has more footage in it or that kind of thing. So I'm curious as to sort of where this project will go in terms of sharing some of that with us. And how often do you tour? Do you tour? I mean, how many shows do you play a year, I guess?
On average, the ensemble, my treasurer's here, we do between 75 and 80. Between 75 and 80. So I'm always hunting for money to make things happen. We have to show activity. And no, we don't tour. It costs a lot of money. I know, I heard someone say, yet. Well, the reason why, it's a lot of impresarios and people don't want to pay for the crazy music. So in the meantime, I have formed a group similar to this in Berlin. So it's called Peak Contemporary Project. And we do avant-garde opera, the crazy music. I haven't had them do any movies yet, but that's coming. So it was a lot simpler for me to just go and work in Berlin than to take these guys. I'd love to have them. I have had some of them in the ensemble join me, but it's about economics. And for the films that we're doing now, right now we have 7 films that we are in the middle of scoring right now that will be done probably by August 1. And I decided to break, I'm going to do Michaud films. I love it, but how do I say this? I am not just a black composer. I'm a composer. I'm not just a jazz composer. I'm a composer. I do symphony work. I do opera. I do ballet. I do all of that. I do happen to love art film. So I've got Russian. I've been doing so much research, Russian films, Japanese films, Swedish films. And the versions that I have sometimes are not great. And for me, that's part of the beauty of it. And I don't have time to hunt and peck for like 20 different versions. if it's clear enough, I can get it to a producer and it can be restored. That's just how I work. I just want to focus on the creative side of it and let someone who really, really knows what to do with the film fix that.
And if people want to keep track of what you're doing, where do they go?
ReneeBakerComposer.net.
ReneeBakerComposer.net.
ReneeBakerComposer.com.
ReneeBakerComposer.com.
Chicago Modern Orchestra Project, one word.org.
Chicago Modern Orchestra Project.org.
And then you can also just Google me, and all kind of stuff will come up. But the equestrian and the bikini model are not me.
Thank you so much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Will you have them stand?
Thank you all.
Hey,
One more hand for the ensemble.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And I want to thank you, Ebertfest audience, for the 18 years. I will see you next year for number 19. Thank you, Leonard. Thank you, Leonard. You are my guest, so I'm going.